Welcome back, everybody. It is September 23rd, 2018, 7:28 p.m. I got a few things to talk about here. We have two tropical storms out in the Atlantic. We have Kirk and we have Leslie. Leslie, I think recently just being named, if I'm not mistaken, or was it Kirk first? I'm not sure. Regardless, we got two tropical storms in the Atlantic. One's kind of getting pinned in the middle here. Kirk has a western path in its near future. We got to see what happens with that because we did have potential Cyclone 8 right in this area here, which has since dissipated due to shear winds. Those shear winds are not expected to be there, though, once Kirk reaches this area. So it's going to be pretty interesting. And we talked yesterday a little bit about Kurt either maybe hooking up over the Leeward Islands or staying west and south and going right through them, becoming a Caribbean issue. So with that said, we're going to talk about Leslie, we're going to talk about Kurt, and then we're finally going to be talking about this disturbance 1 here, which we spoke about yesterday, which is, believe it or not, part of Florence. And sub in the comments section of the last video sent me an interesting article, or not an article, a video actually, which I actually downloaded, and I wanted to go through a few of the clips because they are now finally acknowledging the fact that Florence has broken into two pieces. Now, for the last couple days, well, at least my channel, we've been talking about how Florence broke into pieces. The big part of Florence actually went out towards, which you can see here now, is going towards Ireland in that area, and then a smaller portion of it broke off and stayed south, and then it was broken apart by a high pressure system. Now you could see here over the next 48 hours the disturbance has gone from 10% to 20%, and then if you change charts to the 5-day, it's going up to 30%. So there is a strong chance, guys, that we are going to see part of Florence become another system, whether that be a tropical depression, a tropical storm, or a Category 1 hurricane. Regardless, it is now being covered by mainstream media. And mainstream media is actually calling it Zombie Florence, which is just really funny to me because we've made those references on this channel before. I'm not sure if I actually used the word zombie, but I know Caroline has mentioned the spawn of Florence becoming a new situation to deal with, and it's becoming more and more popular. More and more videos are coming up of people talking about how Florence has returned, Florence the zombie, Florence this, but we were seeing this way before it even left the coast of the U.S., so seeing mainstream media follow up on that is pretty interesting, actually. I have a video pulled up here. I don't know. Let's see how much I can get away with here with playing some of this. But listen to what this lady says about Florence.
First of all, Florence kind of ripped into a few different pieces, but part of the low-level circulation from what was Hurricane Florence
so they're
is still
talking
caught up
about
in the
how
circulation
Florence,
out in the
this part
Atlantic,
broke
south
off,
of Bermuda.
and it's coming
Well,
down
that's
in
quite
this
possible,
direction
and
and
many
could
people have been
develop
blogging about
into
this
a
possibility
tropical
that
storm
what is
or a
left of
hurricane.
Florence.
Now, that is very interesting because this was actually posted hours after I had made that video. So it just, I don't know, the correlation of timing is very interesting. But now that the mainstream weather is now talking about Florence that had broken apart, basically causing Leslie as a storm, because if you remember Florence, the top part went over north towards Ireland. Then we had that bottom part come in, and then we had this big storm just erupt in the middle of the Atlantic, which is now Leslie. And then we have Kirk down here. So it's just interesting to me how I can get, you know, kind of bashed on YouTube for making an assumption. I never make predictions. I don't tell you anything's going to happen. I just show you what I see on data charts. And I mentioned that a part of Florence had broken down and was beginning to look like it was forming. And now we have mainstream weather channels talking about it, and they're calling it Zombie Florence. So they basically already named it. And And like I said, Caroline has been pointing this out to me. She said that it would be the spawn of Florence, which would make more sense, being that the main part of Florence is gone. This would be like a leftover part of it. So it obviously will not be named Zombie Florence, although I'm sure you'll see many videos calling Florence a zombie and I told you so and this and that. But that's why we cover data every single day and we don't just wait until there's storms to cover. We cover the Atlantic Ocean. We watch what's going on over the Atlantic Ocean. We watch all the different pressures and stuff like that. And that's how we determine where these storms are going to go, where they come from, and eventually where they originate from. So we gotta figure this into account. The water off the coast of the Carolinas is very, very warm. As you get more north, the water is less warm, so you don't really see many storms forming up here. But as we saw Florence coming over the northeast, and then it broke into two low pressure systems. One being this invest now, which is now up to 30% over 5 days. And then the other part has already exited this screen, but also another disturbance. So this disturbance too is separate from Leslie here, which is a subtropical storm, not a tropical storm. I'm sorry about that. Kirk is a tropical storm at 40 miles an hour, and Kirk has an interesting path we're going to look at really quick. But I just wanted to point this out to you guys, that this situation going on right here with this invest is not hype. It's not some like situation where I'm trying to get people all worked up. This is actually something they are talking about now on the Weather Channel. The National Hurricane Center has pointed it out. I had a lot of retweets about this. Once, it was weird because I posted it on Twitter and there was no action going on whatsoever. And then within an hour of this article, the one that I just showed you, whether this when this was posted on air, the tweet started getting a lot of attention. So we saw it. I mean, it wasn't that hard to see. Florence floated up this way. A piece broke off of it, and it started spinning counterclockwise. And those are your telltale signs of a cyclone formation. So it is extremely possible that we could be dealing with maybe a tropical storm hitting the exact same area that Florence hit to begin with. So basically, Florence took its long trip all the way across the Atlantic as a Category 4, scared everybody out of their wits thinking it was going to be a big giant landfall, which I never predicted. All I did was tell you what they were saying at the time. It landed as a Category 1. It went up through the northeast, causing a lot of rain and severe weather. It exited the northeast, broke into two parts. One went this way, one came this way, and now we are dealing with, I like to call, the spawn of Florence. That is the, I think, correct name for it. Now, if this thing does form, which we will follow over the next couple days, it's got a 5-day, 30% chance. That is not above 50, but high enough to definitely pay attention to. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, would it surprise you at this point is what I'm saying. Would it surprise you that a hurricane makes landfall, exits out into the Atlantic Ocean, and then just a little piece of it hangs around and then becomes its own storm once again? It's like we've seen it all at this point, guys, especially with the action going on in the Atlantic Ocean at this point. All right. Now that I'm over that part, let's take a look at what we are dealing with as far as Kirk and Leslie. Now, I pulled up a few sites for you. Let's look at, well, that's our rain chart over the next 5 days, which is part of that atmospheric river we've been talking about, which is still very much visible. You can see it extends from the west part of Texas all the way up through Ohio River Valley and now just cutting under New York into the Atlantic. And again, this is aiding in that invest that we're talking about that may curl right back up into the Carolinas. That is aiding in pressing this down and keeping it still. So with that said, let's move on to the spaghetti plots. Here is what they're expecting with this invest. That is at 30% chance over 5 days. If it stays in its current position or is not affected by shear winds, which there is absolutely no shear wind in this area at all right now. So we can expect it to actually form into something bigger than it is, but we cannot say that it's going to be a tropical storm or a hurricane. We are too far out to do that, but you could see the spaghetti plots bring this thing right into North Carolina. Basically, the same angle, maybe a little bit different. Florence came more of a direction like this, and then came south, and then went up like this. But just seeing this is just unbelievable. They have the spaghetti plots out. If you guys remember, the black triangle with the dots in it is the current direction. That is not a forecasted path. That is just where the storm is heading right now. But it will curl up. It just depends on when. Now, this is already an invest, so even if it were to hit today, it would be a pretty significant storm to hit the Outer Banks or the east coast of North Carolina. So just because it's an invest and not a named storm does not mean it should be taken lightly. It's still a storm. It's still bigger than your typical thunderstorm cell. And the fact that they're putting spaghetti plots on it shows that they are watching it very closely. So this is our updated spaghetti plots. A lot of them are beginning to tighten together. We got to see what happens if this thing has enough time in between where it is now in the Atlantic and land to form into something like a tropical storm, which I think may be possible. I don't see a Category 1 out of this, although this is weather. We've seen crazier things happen, but just the coincidence part of it about hitting the same exact area that it did about 6 days ago is just incredible to me. It's just it's intriguing to watch at this point. Now we have another one. This is Leslie right here. So Leslie is all over the place. Now you can see the black triangle again. This is the current direction. Now 2 hours from now, this black triangle could be sticking up in this direction, and that's because it is surrounded by different high pressures. These pressures are what move these storms in the directions they're going. Like I say all the time, they naturally want to move north, counterclockwise spin in the northern hemisphere. If there was no pressures, these storms would just shoot straight north until something stopped them, like a landmass or another high pressure. So right now you could see that these circles in the spaghetti plots are all due to different high pressures surrounding it, not letting it go in any specific direction. Now, some of the updated tropical tidbits models show it getting moving towards the east coast of the U.S. and then getting pushed out by a front, which looks pretty promising, and we're going to hope that happens. Now, it's not going to be this front here. It's going to be this second front that pushes Leslie out, hopefully. So as you can see, this first atmospheric river we've been watching is the one that's pinning this invest, the spawn of Florence, down in this area, which could eventually curl under it and force it up right into the Carolinas. And then once this passes off, then we have this one. This is what we're hoping is going to keep Leslie away from the U.S. Now, unfortunately, I do not think that this will affect Kirk. Now, Kirk's another story. Let's get to Kirk really quick, which is right here. Kirk is taking a southern, a west-southwest movement. So Kirk is following the same path that we had potential Cyclone 8, which was right here, which has dissipated due to shear wind. But again, those shear winds are letting off. So this is going to allow Kirk to grow as it moves towards the Leeward Islands. And in another 4 or 5 days, we'll begin to see whether or not Kirk wants to make a northern movement, whether that be the top of the Leeward Islands and then cause issues over Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic, or if it's going to stay south and become a Caribbean issue, possibly even a Gulf issue. That is way out into the future. We're not going to make any sort of predictions or go into it that far. But again, the spaghetti plots show, for the most part, this thing staying south. That is all due to pressure. So if you could picture pressures down here, pressures over here, and pressures on top, that is why we have Leslie stuck in the middle. We have this invest stuck here with an atmospheric river hooking over it. That will push it into the Carolinas if it stays that way. And then Leslie is basically just sitting out there waiting to be told what to do by the different pressures. So again, in my opinion, I believe one of the fronts coming off the U.S. after the invest that we're watching here by the Carolinas makes its move, we're going to see that front move out this way and push Leslie back out into the ocean. So as of right now, I do not see Leslie becoming an issue for the U.S., although that can change overnight. That's how much weather changes. These high pressures in the Atlantic, they morph and they change and they connect and they break and they leave gaps. And any little gap, these storms will take advantage of that, and that could change the entire outlook of what we are seeing here. So, really quick, we'll take a look at what the Weather Channel graphics have to say. This has not been updated yet because this is now in red territory. They are not even recognizing Leslie right now on this chart. This is that invest that's next to Leslie. So there's two separate storms here. We have subtropical storm Leslie right here, and then we have a separate invest right here, which is forming off of Leslie. So there's a lot going on, and then obviously we have tropical storm Kirk down here, and this low pressure symbol represents that I believe subtropical H system that is fizzling out due to the shear wind. You can see some of this cloud formation. It's moving out into this area, and that may have something to do with that shear wind. But by the time Kirk makes its way all the way down towards the bottom of the Leeward Islands, this part will have passed and there will be less shear wind. And again, there's zero shear wind affecting this invest as well. So that is why I wanted to show you this article here, because this particular weather channel is focusing on this very closely. As you can see, they have now given it a 40% chance of development over the next 5 days, hooking right into the same exact area that Florence originally took. So, all right, how many times can I say the same thing in one video? Let's see. All right, so we covered Kirk. We covered Leslie, and we covered our invest, which is the spawn of Florence. We got to see what happens with this. This is my main concern right now because it is the closest to the U.S., so I will be talking about this more as it develops. If it develops, we got to just wait and see. We got to remember a lot of warm water here, very, very warm water, and if there's no shear wind, then there's really no other way for this storm to go based on the high pressures. Once again, it's the exact mirror image of how Florence's movements were, because we had a high pressure up here that did not allow Florence to go north, and that high pressure stuck out into the U.S., not giving it a gap to slip through, so it went right into North Carolina, and then it did its little southern dip into South Carolina. So you guys are beginning to see why these pressures are so important to watch, because they are what control where these storms go. And if I had that right chart pulled up, I can't believe I don't have it. Might have to wait for next video. But, all right, I hope this was informal to a lot of you, especially to those of you that are new to this channel. What we usually do here is we take current data, whether or not these storms are going to form and become anything. We take the data that they give us, and we go through different possibilities. And that's exactly what we're doing now. We're going through different possibilities, what may or may not happen. I know there's some pretty severe flooding going on in Texas, so I'm trying to spread these videos out so they're not 20 and 30 minutes long, so I can keep everyone focused on one topic at a time. So with that said, as this video goes longer and longer, I'm going to let you guys go for the evening. Tomorrow is another day for another set of data. But again, you can see the current path of Leslie is moving towards the northeast, but don't let that scare you, because chances are that is not where the storm is going to go. We're going to have a front that comes off the U.S. and it's going to push it out to sea. Hopefully no threat. This is what we need to look out for, is this invest right here, because every 9 or 10 hours they are upping the chances of this forming into a cyclone by about 10%. So very, very important to watch this, especially for those of you in the Carolinas that are trying to get back home, are still evacuated, still flooded. This is the last thing that the Carolinas need right now, is another storm. Even if it's a tropical depression, guys, you got to understand, rain is rain, storm surge is storm surge, okay? So you saw what a Category 1 did to this area. Tropical storms are very much capable of doing the same. And again, I don't see it becoming a Category 1 at, if anything, maybe a tropical storm, but still, it would just be devastating on top of what already happened to these people. So with that said, guys, I'm going to let you go. I know I rambled a little bit here, but, you know, I get excited sometimes, and that's what happens. So we got one invest, we got two invest, we have subtropical storm Leslie, and then we have tropical storm Kirk, which will more than likely become a hurricane during its travels towards the Leeward Islands. No sign of a pressure release going on, so anything that comes off the west coast of Africa, at least for the next 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half, 10 days, will more than likely come right through the Cape Verde Islands, which are right here, and stay south until something allows it to move up. So we just got to keep an eye on that. And with that said, guys, I'm going to let you go. Finally, I think I've said that about 5 times. Hope you all have a great evening. I will talk to you guys tomorrow during the day, possibly the morning. If not, then the afternoon. Thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you guys very soon. Happy Sunday. Go Giants. Bye-bye.